In 1966, during what would become the Beatles' final concert, a disabled fan in the front row did something that stopped John Lennon mid-song and silenced 25,000 screaming fans in an instant. What happened next wasn't just captured by photographers. It made international headlines and revealed a side of the world's biggest rock star that no one expected to see. But what did John Lennon whisper to that young man that was so powerful it moved an entire stadium to tears? The August heat shimmers off the concrete at Candlestick Park as 25,000 voices merge into a single, deafening roar that seems to shake the very foundations of San Francisco. It's August 29th, 1966, and the air crackles with electricity unrelated to the amplifiers. Flashbulbs pop like scattered lightning across the stadium, creating brief, blinding moments where the crowd disappears into white light, before materializing again in waves of reaching hands and tear-streaked faces. Security guards in crisp white shirts already show dark patches of sweat as they struggle to maintain the flimsy barriers separating the massive crowd from their four heroes. The wooden police barricades groan under the constant pressure of bodies surging forward, each fan desperate to close the impossible distance between themselves and immortality. The smell of summer grass mingles with teenage perfume, cigarette smoke, and something else entirely, the intoxicating scent of pure, unbridled worship. In the front row, pressed against the stage barrier, sits a young man whose wheelchair seems almost swallowed by the chaos around him. His friends, 3 teenagers who clearly planned this moment for months, have positioned him perfectly, their protective circle creating a small island of stability in an ocean of motion. His hands grip the armrests of his chair, not from fear, but from anticipation so intense it's almost painful to witness. His eyes never leave the empty stage, wide with a hope so raw it cuts through the cynicism that hangs over everything else like smog. The stadium lights dim slightly, and the roar somehow manages to double in volume. A woman near the disabled fan collapses, overwhelmed before the Beatles have even appeared. Another fan climbs onto someone's shoulders, screaming lyrics to songs that haven't been written yet. The young man in the wheelchair simply closes his eyes for a moment, as if storing this feeling somewhere deep and permanent. Then, through the speakers crackling with feedback, comes the opening chord of rock and roll music, and 4 silhouettes appear at the back of the stage. The crowd's response is no longer just sound. It's a physical force that seems to bend the very air. Programs and flowers rain down like confetti from heaven. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wail as more fans collapse outside the gates, unable to accept that they won't make it inside. But in the front row, the young man opens his eyes, and in them burns something that transcends the hysteria around him. This isn't just about music or fame or teenage fantasy. This is about connection, about bridging the impossible gulf between dream and reality. His right hand slowly lifts from his armrest, extending toward the stage with a faith so complete it seems to create its own gravity. The blazing spotlights flicker on, flooding everything in brilliant white, and suddenly 4 young men from Liverpool step into view, completely unaware that in 37 minutes, one small gesture will change everything they thought they knew about what it means to touch another human soul. Behind the towering amplifiers, John Lennon stares into a cracked mirror propped against a folding chair, watching his own reflection practice the smile that no longer reaches his eyes. 6 months of death threats following his more popular than Jesus comment have carved lines around his mouth that weren't there during Help. The face looking back at him belongs to a 26-year-old man who feels decades older, carrying the weight of every teenage dream projected onto his shoulders like stones in his pockets. Paul McCartney bounces on his toes nearby, bass guitar slung across his shoulder, trying to inject energy into air thick with unspoken endings. He knows, even if the others won't admit it, that this is their last dance with live performance. The magic that once made them feel invincible now feels like a straitjacket. Every chord progression has been played 1,000 times, every harmony perfected to the point of suffocation. He catches John's eye in the mirror and offers a thumbs up that neither of them believes. George Harrison sits cross-legged on an amp case, tuning his guitar with the methodical precision of a man who has learned that music is the only honest conversation left in his life. At 23, he's already tired of being the quiet Beatle, tired of having his spiritual searching dismissed as teenage rebellion. His fingers find the familiar shapes of chords that once felt like revelations, but now feel like prayers spoken in a language the world refuses to understand. Ringo Starr spins his drumsticks between his fingers, a nervous habit that has intensified with each tour. The rhythm that once felt effortless now requires conscious effort, as if his heartbeat itself has become performance. He watches his three friends prepare for what they all sense might be their final bow, each lost in private worlds that fame has made increasingly isolated from one another. The crowd's roar penetrates even the thick stage walls, a constant reminder of the impossible expectations waiting beyond the curtain. They can feel the weight of 25,000 individual hungers, each fan believing that somehow, through some miracle of proximity, their lives will be transformed by simply breathing the same air as their heroes. The Beatles have become prisoners of their own mythology, trapped between the ordinary young men they remain in private, and the demigods the world demands them to be in public. John adjusts his guitar strap and feels the familiar knot in his stomach that has accompanied every performance since Hamburg. But tonight carries extra weight, the knowledge that after this, they'll retreat to the studio, to the controlled environment where they can still create without feeling like zoo animals on display. Tonight is goodbye to something that once felt like the most natural thing in the world. As they walk toward the stage entrance, each step bringing them closer to the wall of sound that will soon envelop them, none of them can imagine that soon. A single outstretched hand will remind them why they picked up instruments in the first place. The stage lights blaze ahead, like an entrance to another world, one where John Lennon will discover that sometimes the most profound moments happen when you stop performing and simply choose to be human. 20 minutes into their set, that moment of truth arrives unexpectedly. The opening notes of Yesterday float across Candlestick Park like a gentle benediction, Paul's voice carrying a melancholy that seems to acknowledge this moment's place in history. The crowd has settled into something resembling reverence, the sea of humanity swaying in unconscious unison as the song builds toward its climax. John stands stage left, harmonica ready for his entrance, when he notices movement in the front row that doesn't match the rhythm of the crowd. The wooden barrier separating the fans from the stage groans under renewed pressure as bodies surge forward during the song's emotional peak. The disabled fan's wheelchair shifts violently as people press against it from behind, and for a terrifying moment it tilts forward at a dangerous angle. His friends grab frantically at the chair's handles, but the momentum of the crowd threatens to send him tumbling onto the concrete below. Security guards move swiftly toward the disturbance, their hands already reaching to pull him back to safety, but an invisible force stops them mid-motion. Instead of panic or fear, the fan's face radiates pure determination. His right arm extends upward through the chaos, not grasping desperately, but offering his open palm toward John Lennon, who stands frozen with his harmonica halfway to his lips. Paul's voice continues for another line before trailing off as he realizes John has stopped playing entirely. The bass line stumbles, then dies. George's guitar fades to nothing. Even Ringo's steady beat falters as all four Beatles turn to see what has captured John's complete attention. The crowd's singing gradually gives way to confused murmurs, then to an eerie quiet that spreads backward through the stadium like ripples on a pond. Time stretches impossibly thin. His hand remains extended, trembling slightly from the effort, but unwavering in its purpose. His eyes lock onto John's with an intensity that cuts through every barrier between performer and audience, between famous and unknown, between the sacred and the ordinary. In that gaze lives every reason John ever picked up a guitar, every dream he's ever had about music's power to connect human hearts across impossible distances. Every soul in the stadium seems to hold their collective breath. Photographers lower their cameras, sensing that magic unrehearsable is unfolding. Security guards step back instinctively, recognizing that this moment belongs to something transcendent beyond crowd control. Even the wind seems to pause, as if nature itself understands that what happens next will echo far beyond this concrete amphitheatre. John takes a step toward the platform's edge, his guitar hanging loose around his neck. His face shows no trace of the practiced Beatles smile, no hint of the entertainer's mask. What remains is simply a young man from Liverpool confronting the raw humanity reflected in another's eyes. The harmonica nearly slips from his fingers, and he catches it with a sound that seems unnaturally loud in the profound quiet. The disabled fan's friends stop their frantic efforts to steady his wheelchair and simply watch, tears streaming down their faces as they realize they're witnessing something that will live in their memories forever. His hand continues stretching upward, patient and steady, as if he has all the time in the world and complete certainty that his gesture will be answered with the kindness it deserves. John Lennon drops to one knee at the stage edge without hesitation, the movement so natural it seems choreographed by universal energies beyond conscious thought. His hands reach down to grasp the young fan's outstretched fingers, and when their skin touches, something electric passes between them that has nothing to do with stage lights or amplification. The contact is gentle but firm, John's calloused musician's fingers wrapping around those of someone who has probably never been touched by his hero, except in dreams. Leaning forward until their faces are only inches apart, John speaks words meant for no ears but those of the person before him. His lips move with quiet urgency, sharing something that photographers will speculate about for decades but never capture. Whatever passes between them in those whispered seconds causes the fan's eyes to fill with tears that reflect the harsh glare of performance like scattered diamonds. His free hand rises to cover his heart, as if trying to hold John's words inside his chest forever. Without breaking eye contact, John reaches into his shirt pocket and withdraws the silver harmonica he's carried since their Hamburg days, the same instrument that provided the haunting melody to Love Me Do and countless other songs. He places it carefully into the fan's palm, folding his fingers around it with the tenderness of someone entrusting a sacred relic. The harmonica catches the light, transforming from a simple musical instrument into something approaching holy. Paul appears at John's shoulder first, his bass forgotten as he kneels beside his friend. His hand finds the young man's shoulder with a touch so gentle it seems to surprise even Paul himself. George follows moments later, his typically reserved demeanour melting away as he reaches out to briefly squeeze the fan's forearm. Finally, Ringo arrives, completing the circle by placing both hands on the wheelchair's armrests and leaning down to meet the wheelchair-bound concert-goer's eyes, with a smile that speaks of shared understanding across all the barriers that typically separate people from their heroes. The stadium erupts, but this time the sound carries a different quality entirely. Instead of the usual screaming hysteria, what rises from countless throats is something closer to reverence. Applause mixed with sobs, cheers tempered by awe. Flashbulbs pop frantically as photographers capture images that will appear on front pages worldwide, but the Beatles remain focused solely on him, creating a bubble of intimacy that the cameras can document but never truly penetrate. As they finally rise and step back from the stage edge, John wipes his eyes with the back of his hand, no longer caring about the carefully maintained image of cool detachment. The young man clutches the harmonica against his chest, his friends gathering around him in protective wonder. The Beatles return to their positions, but when they resume "Yesterday," Paul's voice carries new weight, John's harmonica solo soars with renewed purpose, and the entire stadium seems to breathe in perfect synchronization. The moment lasts only 3 minutes in real time, but its impact ripples outward like stones dropped in still water. Tomorrow's headlines will struggle to capture what actually happened. How 4 young men stepped out of their personas and into genuine humanity. How a single gesture of connection transformed not just one disabled fan's life, but reminded everyone present that beneath all the screaming and chaos, music's real power lies in its ability to make strangers feel less alone in the world.